So I'm about 50 to 55 hours into The Division, put in my time. I don't know if I want to call this a review really, even though the title says so, but it's just my take on the game. By the way, if you want to know why every gaming outlet took so long on their reviews, it's because this kind of game just can't be reviewed in a day. You need to get to the end game, you need to experience the end game, you need to experience everything, gearing, etc. Obviously everyone is comparing this game to Destiny, and that's fine. Let's talk about that comparison now before we get to the actual review. This game is much more like Diablo 3 than it is Destiny, and that's because of how the game's main gearing and stat systems work. In Destiny, stats are very shallow. Strength, discipline, intellect, light. You have deeper stats on a per gun basis, but archetypes are laid out pretty well that there's not a lot of min-maxing to do. You're not focusing your time on stats in Destiny nearly as much as you are in The Division. In The Division, you have way more stats to care about. Sure, you have firearms, stamina, and electronics, which match the big three of Destiny, but then you get to go way deeper with stat customization. Crit chance, crit damage, weapon damage, damage against elites, protection against elites, exotic damage resistance, burn, disorient, shock resist. You see where I'm getting at? You're not min-maxing nearly as hard in Destiny as you will be in The Division. What did you do in Diablo 3? You found your stats, and based on your class, you sought to maximize those stats via min-maxing. Hell, even recalibration, where you can reroll one stat of your choosing, is literally reforging from Diablo 3. Nearly a carbon copy. Oh, but Diablo has magic and swords and stuff, Division doesn't, it has guns. Destiny has guns too, therefore Division is more like Destiny. This is a really dumb argument, and I've seen it made. The Division is an RPG first and a third-person shooter second. The stat system is way more reminiscent of Diablo or any other RPG than it is to Destiny. Are there similarities between Destiny and The Division? Absolutely. But I don't think there are enough similarities to be able to say that Destiny is better than The Division or Division is better than Destiny. They're both loot grindy games, but the way that they actually go about giving you said loot is different. Destiny is much more MMORPG-like, weekly resets, time-gated loot, so you're not able to just blitz your way to max loot in a couple of days. The Division and Diablo, on the other hand, basically have very little time-gated limits on how much loot you can get per day. If you want to grind challenge modes in the Dark Zone all day, you can do that, much like you can grind Nephilim rifts in Diablo 3. That system works for those types of games because they're dungeon crawler loot games. Imagine if Diablo 3's loot system worked like Destiny's. It would be awful. So if you're experienced with Diablo 3 and that kind of game, then The Division will immediately feel familiar. It is Diablo 3 in a shooter Manhattan more than it is Destiny. The biggest question I got all week was, I like Destiny. Will I like The Division? And the answer is, I don't know, because I need to know why you like Destiny. Here's what I will say. Despite the fact that The Division is an RPG first and a shooter second, if you do not like third-person shooters or are not willing to tolerate a third-person cover-based shooter style of gameplay and combat, then you are not going to like The Division. I don't care how much you like RPGs and min-maxing stats, if you're not willing to deal with the combat system, you are just not going to have fun with the game. So why do you like Destiny, or by extension Diablo 3? Do you like the loot grind? Do you like playing shooters with friends? Do you have friends to play The Division with? Do you enjoy the experience of min-maxing gear and finding perfect gear combos? If so, then I would definitely give it a chance. I got to where I am now in about 50 to 55 hours of gameplay. Pretty well geared, definitely improvements and min-maxing still to do, but in 50 hours, I had fun with it. But if I were playing solo, I probably would have not bothered with The Division. I'm not the kind of person to do matchmaking to find groups, that's just me personally. If you're the more adventurous type, don't mind testing the waters, don't mind an LFG experience or a matchmaking with randoms experience, then it's worth a shot. If you like third-person cover-based shooters, it's probably worth a shot. The combat in The Division is nothing like Destiny. They both have guns, they both have abilities. That's basically where the comparisons end. Destiny's first-person shooting is buttery smooth. I remember playing The Division for many hours on launch day, going back to Destiny to do some raids, and just being like, oh, this is so nice. The Division's third-person shooting will require some getting used to. Don't compare the two. It's like comparing Call of Duty to Just Cause 3. Yeah, they both have guns, but that's it. So that's all the talk on comparing The Division to Destiny. Yes, they have some similarities, but they're different enough that I don't think the two should be judged as 100% competitors. Both can exist at the same time. There does not need to be a winner. That being said, I'm sure people are going to ask me anyway, but I do prefer Destiny over The Division. I'm not the biggest fan of third-person cover-based shooters, but I don't think it's horrible in any way, and I can still have plenty of fun with them. Moving on. If you participated in the beta of The Division, I would say don't expect anything too different. It is still the same kind of feeling. Nothing was changed significantly in any way. Do not play The Division because you're looking for a good story. Don't get me wrong, it's not like the story is horrendous or doesn't make sense or is ambiguous like a game we all may or may not know, but it's not the reason I'm playing the game. It's interesting to find out new things about the world, how the situation came to be, learning backstory. Intel, aka the collectibles, littered New York City in a way that Grimoire should probably litter the world of Destiny. There's more to know about the universe if you want to go learn about it, but if you don't care, then it's not an integral part of the gameplay experience. With regards to the graphics and the visuals, I can't speak for PC, but on PS4, the game has been running fine minus some frame rate issues when there's a lot of stuff happening on the screen, explosions, particle effects, and minus the few random crashes that I've gotten while playing. I can chalk that up to the game just being released and them trying to figure out new bugs. The weather effects are great, just like they were in the beta. Loading times can be lengthy when they actually happen. Fast travel, joining a group, logging in. However, they're seldom enough that they're not a huge inconvenience, at least nothing like Bloodborne's early loading issues. You could go a very, very long period of time without ever hitting a loading screen if you wanted. Combat is solid for a third-person shooter. In the early game, enemy types are pretty bland, just generic dudes shooting at you, but as you level up, you encounter a wider variety of enemies, the cleaners, Rikers, and your strategies have to change a little bit depending on the enemy that you fight. Certain enemies have weak points where you don't necessarily deal bonus damage to them, but can cause something bad to happen to the target if you hit their weak point enough times. For example, these big dudes have a tiny red toolbox on their back. Shoot it enough times and it pops, disabling the target for a while and dealing a ton of damage to them. You have snipers, grenade spammers, melee dudes, medics, defenders, horrifyingly deadly shotgunners, engineers who can hack your equipment, flamethrower guys, and then just regular generic dudes as well. There's variety, but the aesthetic of the game means that there's not a whole lot that can be done to introduce something more interesting. It's bad guys with guns shooting at you for the most part. You do need to approach each fight, especially challenge missions fight, a little bit differently each time, although at the end of the day, it's still going to be see bad guy, shoot bad guy. If you are not okay with shooting a lot of guys over and over again, then you may want to reconsider. The cover system works great most of the time. There will be a few times where you get stuck on something or go to cover instead of rolling away, climbing on something on accident, but it doesn't happen often enough that it will end up causing your demise every single time you hit the wrong button. Moving from cover to cover is as easy as looking at the new place you want to move to and holding down the button. Skills and talents add a nice splash of variety to combat, and it is actually wise to have different skill and talent combinations to maximize your effectiveness. If you're playing more of a medic role, then your talents will look a little different to someone playing a crowd control or support role. Sounds like I'm stating the obvious with that one, but in a game without actual classes like healer, tank, etc., this is nice to have. That's not to say that every skill and every talent is outstanding either though, because stuff like the riot shield is probably not going to see a ton of use unless a build is made specifically for that kind of skill and talent loadout. Healing skills, support skills that boost your team's damage, and the turret are likely to remain the most popular. The Division is best with a group. Solo play is fine while leveling, but unlike Diablo 3, it is much harder to roam around high-level areas and challenges without going very, very slow. However, there is matchmaking available at every safe house, so you can just boot up the menu and get matched with other people. I'd say that The Division relies more on having friends than Destiny does, not because you need to use advanced fighting tactics, but just because everything can take a while to kill. While leveling, the only time enemies should feel bullet spongy is if you are very undergeared or have bad weapons. An averagely geared level 30 player should be able to get through a hard mode daily mission without feeling like they're pulling teeth. Challenge missions, on the other hand, are a very different story. Getting to level 30 should take about 20 hours or so depending on your speed. There's usually 1 or 2 story missions per area, with each area having a safe house which contains a few side missions and encounters. These are usually the same kind of missions per area though, as in every area felt like it had a missing person side mission, a hostage rescue, securing the delivery mission, etc. So while there is mission variety, it feels like they took a block of side missions and encounters and just copy-pasted the same set of missions to every other area in the game. And once again, most of these missions involve running and shooting bad guys, do a small thing, shoot more bad guys, you get it. As for the loot, The Division loves to throw loot at you. The game is designed so that if you want to go grind for loot, you can grind basically as hard as you want. There is nothing limiting your path. Around level 25 is when the game starts throwing superior level items at you, aka legendaries, aka epics, aka purples, whatever you want to call them. This is not a Division specific issue, but I really don't like how games nowadays are sending people straight to legendary level gear as soon as possible. I wish games would utilize blue, rare level gear a little bit longer, as to not immediately have people stop caring about that level of gear as soon as they hit max level. I get that people want instant gratification, but it's alright to slow things down a little bit. If you love stats and min-maxing, then you are going to have a field day with The Division. Weapons have 4 mod slots, 4 attachments, which boost all sorts of things: damage, crit, magazine size, rate of fire, accuracy, stability, and you can mess with this as much as you want. The main 5 weapon types in the game are assault rifles, submachine guns, light machine guns, marksman rifles, aka snipers, and shotguns. You also have a pistol which has unlimited ammo, and double barrel shotguns as well if you are so inclined. A few people have asked if they can stay in a strictly sniper role, and my answer is, that's probably not something you're going to want to do all the time. You can snipe a lot, but at some point you're going to need to break out another weapon. Things don't exactly die with just 1 shot to the head from a sniper. However, I think there is too much variety, to a fault. There are plenty of stats to choose from, but only certain stats can roll on certain pieces of gear, and there are so many stats that you aren't going to see a stat that is possible to roll on every piece of gear. Say you want to make a crit damage set of gear. Well, it's really hard to do that because crit damage is only possible on a couple pieces of gear. So instead of being able to focus on a particular build, you just end up with a sprinkling of every single stat. There is no focus. It's too much. It's too complicated. You can't do anything super meaningful. Recalibration can help, but it can only go so far since you can only re-roll 1 stat. Crafting is another way to get gear, but it's not really something you should worry about a ton until you get to the endgame. You get blueprints from doing missions while leveling, and you can craft if you want to, but it's not a very deep or complex experience. You have tools, electronics, fabric, and weapon parts to make whatever items you want to make. Weapon parts make weapons, fabric makes gear, etc. However, even at the higher levels, crafting doesn't take a whole lot of brain power. I was hoping that in order to make high-end items, you'd need special or specific crafting materials, maybe from challenge bosses or dark zone bosses. This is not the case, as most high-end items just require high-end weapon parts, tools, division tech, etc. Still, it is totally possible to craft your way into excellent sets of gear, and that's not to say a more advanced crafting system could not be implemented in the future. Then we hit the end game, the thing that is probably the most important with these types of games. I have a video that outlines what exactly the end game entails, so definitely check that out if you're still wondering about buying the game. But essentially, at least at launch of the game, you have challenge missions and the Dark Zone. Incursions are coming very shortly. Phoenix credits are the main currency of the endgame, netting you the best items and the best blueprints, with Dark Zone credits not too far behind. You gain Phoenix credits from killing named elites and doing the daily hard and challenge missions. You then use this currency to buy gear directly or to buy crafting blueprints to make your own gear. Phoenix credits were nerfed very recently to the point that any sort of farming route you might have had in the Dark Zone is now likely outclassed by just running the daily hard and challenge modes. This has pissed off a lot of players because doing either challenge missions or the Dark Zone were both reasonable options for gearing up. Now, the challenge missions are the most beneficial, or at least appear to be. If I were to guess, Phoenix credits were probably nerfed because it was too efficient to grind the Dark Zone for them, and I'm willing to bet that adjustments are being made to buff them back, but that's just a guess. The Dark Zone is where you can earn some of the best loot in the game. There are various landmarks where named enemies hang out and they will respawn every so often. Loot in the Dark Zone is contaminated, meaning it must be extracted at an extraction point before it can be used. You can and will encounter other players in the Dark Zone. They can attack you and you can attack them. Going rogue, aka attacking other players, causes a significant death penalty and at the moment doesn't really seem to be worth it for any sort of monetary or loot gains. People, at the moment, only seem to go rogue because they're just looking for some sort of PvP action, since the game does not actually have any PvP modes like you'd see in other multiplayer games. Note that the game does not limit you with regards to farming loot. If you wanted to sit on the game for 12 hours straight and grind challenge missions and Dark Zone for loot, you can absolutely go ahead and do that. There are positives and negatives to that. Positive, you can do whatever you want. Negative, you can feel like you're done with the game or feel like there's nothing to do faster than you might normally would. I don't really have too many gripes with the game. Most of my gripes are just kind of nitpicky things or balance issues which can be fixed. I'm pretty deep into the endgame, not Dark Zone level 50 just yet, but I have almost every slot equipped with a high-end piece of gear and slightly above average stats. Upgrades at this point in the game for me are pretty minimal, but this happens with every single loot game once you reach the endgame status. If you're light level 315 or higher in Destiny, it's a very similar feeling. This isn't something that the game can really avoid, nor is it something that pretty much any other game can avoid either. At some point, you're just gonna feel done. However, the majority of the player base is probably not even level 30 yet, and me being me, well, I kind of have to put in a lot of time into games so that I can make YouTube content for them, so please don't take my experience of feeling almost done as the norm at this point in the game's life. At the end of the day, it was still 55 hours of gameplay that I got out of it, and I'm going to play even more. I will say one gripe might be that when you're in the endgame of an RPG, your loot makes you stick out. You look awesome, you have awesome looking weapons and armor. That doesn't really feel like it exists in The Division. You end up just looking like any other dude, with the clothing options having more of an impact on your visual representation than your actual high-end equipment. It's kind of tough to design cool-looking RPG gear when your setting is modern-day Manhattan. Here's a nitpicky gripe if you're looking for an example. If you reload your weapon, then perform an action, a lot of the time your reload simply won't count and you'll have to reload again. You can see my bullet counter go to the max, but then I do something and now I need to reload because the animation didn't finish, even though the bullet counter is at the maximum. It's pretty annoying, but it's hopefully something that can be addressed. So, if you're just looking for the too long did not watch version of this video, here it is. The Division is a very solidly built game. It doesn't break any molds, but it has a great RPG stat system and is a well put together shooter. It is a loot grindy game much more reminiscent of Diablo than it is of Destiny. However, you need to enjoy third-person shooters or you will probably not enjoy the game, regardless of how much you like Destiny or Diablo. Having friends play with you will greatly enhance the experience, and I don't actually recommend the game if you do not have anyone to play with. Overall, the experience has been mostly positive for me, and I think if you meet the criteria for playing this game, then it will be worth your time. That criteria is liking looter games, liking grindy games, liking third-person shooters, and preferably having people to play it with. Ubisoft has put out a year one roadmap in terms of what to expect from DLC. There are 5 known updates coming: April, May, June, summer, and winter, with the last 3 being expansions and the first 2 being content updates, so there is plenty of content coming. The Division appears to be like Destiny in that you should play while the content is hot, give it some time to cool off, then come back when there's new stuff to do. But if you want to get into The Division, I would do it sooner rather than later. That is my overview of The Division. I will continue to cover it as I see fit, if I have things to talk about, if there's new stuff to cover, and what have you. This is my first full review of a game that I've ever done, so I would appreciate feedback on the review itself, not necessarily my opinion on the game, although you can do that as well if you are so inclined. If it was too long, if I missed stuff, thought I should cover certain things more or less, just let me know so I can adapt for the future. I feel like I might have gone overboard a little bit with this review. It's pretty long, but, you know, just let me know how it did. If you enjoyed it, I definitely wouldn't mind seeing a positive rating. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Whew, that's a long video. That is a long video.